Yes.
Gem,
Yes.
Petrella,
Yes.
Wirball.
Yes.
Thank you very much. That brings us, good evening, that brings us to item 4A, a recommendation to approve a resolution authorizing the mayor and city council to execute a temporary license agreement between the city of St. Charles and Pollyanna Brewing Company at 106 Riverside Avenue. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm sorry, Derek was ill this evening, so he was not able to attend, so I will be presenting this agenda item. This is a request from Pollyanna Brewing to continue using the outdoor space of the shared parking lot that we are currently using just on the south side of their building. Just to go over some of the highlights from the license agreement, this will be the same layout as in previous years. It will also match the same fees that are being employed for the First Street Plaza. They will be charged a $40 a seat fee, however, because we do not have to split that into two different 100-day periods. So that will just all be collected at the beginning and the outset of the outdoor dining season. They will be utilizing 126 seats. So that will amount in $5,040 collected. And this agreement will include them to allow permit the string lights that are going to be above the actual parking lot. That does not interfere with any plow usage, and that will be required to be connected to a private outlet, which has already been addressed and is currently connected to private outlet, not the city's power source. They will also be required to comply with our food truck ordinance that was modified, and that any food trucks will have to be inside the outdoor dining area that is designated on the plan and follow our other food truck ordinance requirements. We will not be requiring a deposit for this item because that is a parking lot versus plaza, so we have no issues with damage potentially to the paver system that we have in the plaza. So with that, I can answer any questions, but we are just looking to keep it consistent with previous years.
Mark.
With the food truck ordinances, I know Alderperson Sokaitis brought up kind of having like a sticker, something that says kind of like that St. Charles approved. Is there something, is that the same for this year? Is it a newer sticker? How does that?
Correct. That ordinance will be required to be displayed on the outdoor of the vehicle as they are permitted.
All right, thank you.
Tim.
I'm assuming that there is still the $250 application fee.
Move for approval. Second.
Moved by Brian, second by David. Roll call, please.
Fessner,
Yes.
Weber,
Yes.
Sokaitis,
Yes.
Folk,
Yes.
Munn,
Yes.
Lencioni,
Yes.
Gem,
Yes.
Petrella,
Yes.
Wirball.
Yes.
Thank you, that passes. Moving on to item 5C. Good evening, Tim. Recommendation to waive the formal bid procedure and approve a resolution awarding a proposal for the Well 9 variable frequency drive repair.
Evening. I'll just give a quick update and then open it up to any questions. This is for a variable frequency drive that drives the well, kind of allows it to pace up and down. We had an emergency failure, the drive ended up burning up. We have it running on a backup breaker. We are recommending, or we are requesting and recommending to formally waive the bid and to move forward with a replacement because the replacement takes 16 to 24 weeks. Any questions?
Mark.
Yeah, it's not budgeted, so where are we getting the money from?
Like I put in my executive summary, we found some money left over from other projects. We're making a budget transfer to cover the funds.
Ron. Good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm looking for a motion.
So moved. Second.
Moved by Paul, seconded by Bob. Roll call, please.
Fessner,
Yes.
Weber,
Yes.
Sokaitis,
Yes.
Folk,
Yes.
Munn,
Yes.
Lencioni,
Yes.
Gem,
Yes.
Bongard, Petrella,
Yes.
Wirball.
Yes.
Thank you, that passes. Moving on to item 5H, a recommendation to approve a resolution awarding directional boring services to York Construction and Management Company for a one-year period beginning May 1st, 2025 through April 30th, 2026. Good evening.
Good evening. So we do directional boring for repairs, improvements on it, and we typically bid it in a 3-year period. It's for 1 year plus an increase for the second and third. It's the way the bids have gone. The last 3-year period, we followed a protocol before of all these items, and it put us in a very close competition, less than 0.3 of a difference between first and second place last year. So last 3-year period, we elected to award to both of them and follow costs and task bidding and so forth. So now we're into a brand new period of first year now and possibly second, third. So we went back and looked at the last 4 years of all the items we actually used and billed during that period, averaged them out, and that assigned the quantities that we asked them, therefore, to provide pricing for. That's the process we went through this year, and so we ended up getting 4 qualified bids on all of them, and we compared them all. There's clearly a low bidder, so we're not into any kind of a tie anymore, and we're going to proceed. So the recommendation is to award to the low responsible bidder, York Construction Management Company. It's a first year plus a second and third option, which is what we typically do. Any questions on that?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion by David, second by Brian. Roll call, please.
Fessner?
Yes.
Weber?
Abstain.
Kulkaitis?
Yes.
Folks?
Yes.
Munn?
Yes.
Montioni?
Yes.
Gem?
Yes.
Petrella?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Thank you, that passes. Moving on to item 5J, sorry. Recommendation to approve a resolution awarding a request for proposal for a 3-year service agreement for valve exercising and leak detection program. I skipped I.
Yeah, you did.
Cross it off.
Would you like me to do it, or do you want me to
No,
come back?
stay in order.
Okay.
Recommendation to approve a resolution authorizing a purchase order with Mead Electric for streetlight maintenance services and LED upgrade conversions for a 1-year period beginning May 1st, 2025 through April 30th, 2026, with options to extend the contract for the 2nd and 3rd years.
Same scenario. The street lighting and LED upgrades bid exactly the same as last year. Mead has been doing that for several 3-year bid process on it with us. So we got 4 bids submitted. A lot of people applied, but only 4 submitted bids. They're all qualified companies. So Mead is substantially lower, and we have great record with them. So that's all I've got to say about it. We recommend awarding. Yeah.
I'm just curious, what percentage of conversion from the old sodium lights to the LED lights, where are we at with that?
We're just about maybe 15% across the city.
Okay.
And that includes all the decorative ones, which are, expensive and not as drastic. The difficulty, just real quickly on the street lighting, is HPS is obsolete, and you can not get parts a lot of the time. So some things that we're not even planning on, it fails, and we just have to change it to LED. But we've made a push yet this fiscal year. We've got several out to try and get done before the end of the year.
Ron?
Thank you. I'm looking at the bids. There's $500,000 between the low and the high, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Are we sure we're getting what we want with the quality of the product and service?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm not sure we would with some of the others, Ron, but absolutely with me. They're very responsive and very qualified.
Because I'm a little confused. I looked at the details of the bid. Their hourly rate is high, their crew rate is higher, but yet their product cost is lower. So I just want to make sure that's a big discrepancy.
Yeah, if you were just looking at those bids as raw numbers out, you'd think there's something wrong with it.
Well, that's why I'm asking.
But there isn't.
Okay.
It's probably been 8-9 years they've done our work.
Oh, yeah,
Well.
I've seen the trucks around.
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the
Yeah,
dollar
it is.
amounts, and that's a big discrepancy, $500,000. I've never seen one that big.
But, Mead does this throughout Chicagoland. I can't say the same with the other bidders.
Okay.
So,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion by Brian, second by Paul. Roll call, please.
Fessner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Kulkaitis?
Yes.
Folks?
Yes.
Munn?
Yes.
Montioni?
Yes.
Gem?
Yes.
Petrella?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Thank you.
Moving along, item 5J, recommendation to approve a resolution awarding a request for proposal for a 3-year service agreement for valve exercising and leak detection program. Mr. Wilson.
So the city went out for an RFP for the services, valve exercising and leak detection. Valve exercising is pretty self-explanatory. They go through and they help maintain and exercise our valves. We just don't have the staffing for that, so it's an easier contract for us to kind of sub out. The leak detection, they go throughout the entire system and look for leaks that haven't come to the surface. They pinpoint those leaks, and the city goes and digs those leaks up and makes repairs. Again, just to kind of help reduce our water loss. M.E. Simpson has had the contract for the last 3 years. They are the only one to submit a proposal for this project, or for the next 3 years. We're recommending to move forward with their services. Any questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion by Brian, seconded by Ed. Roll call, please.
Fessner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Kulkaitis?
Yes.
Folks?
Yes.
Munn?
Yes.
Lencioni.
Yes.
Gem.
Yes.
Petrella.
Yes.
Wirball.
Yes.
Thank you. 5K, a recommendation to approve a resolution awarding the bid for the sanitary sewer lining program.
So sanitary sewer lining program is basically putting a liner in existing infrastructure or existing pipe. It's a cost-effective way instead of digging up the sanitary mains. It does add an extended life to those sanitary mains. This year we went out to bid like we do every year for this work. We received 5 bidders. National Power Riding came in the lowest bid. They've had the project for the last 2 years. They won those bids the last 2 years. Our recommendation is to move forward with award to National Power Riding.
Well, and I do recall us approving this in previous years. Why such a high budgeted amount? If we have sort of a history of what they...
We based it off, so it's a unit cost contract. So when we put out the bid, we based it off last year's amounts for the unit cost plus maybe about 5%. This year, the low bidder came in significantly lower than the unit cost for last year.
What percentage of this project is complete, or is this a never-ending type of project as the material wears out? How does that work?
It's tied with CMOM. So if you remember with CMOM, we kind of go from basin to basin. We have 14 basins, so it takes us about 14 years to go around the entire city. And what we do is each basin, each drainage basin, we target the most severe locations. This doesn't cover every location that needs a liner.
Okay. Kim?
So assuming this is an ongoing project, like you said, then for next year's budget, do you think you'll be more in line with what we're proposing for the cost for this year, or will it be budgeted similar?
Well, we're getting close to the budget season because the unit cost came in so low. We'll see what the current economy is doing, and we'll base our budget off the economy. And of course, too, what we also have need in that basin. So that basin that we target next year might have more sewer lining that we need done or less sewer lining.
Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve. Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Brian. Roll call, please.
Fessner.
Yes.
Weber.
Yes.
Kulkaitis.
Yes.
Folk.
Yes.
Mund.
Yes.
Lencioni.
Yes.
Gem.
Yes.
Petrella.
Yes.
Wirball.
Yes.
Thank you, that passes. 5L, a recommendation to approve a resolution awarding the bid for water and wastewater treatment chemicals.
So you remember last month we were talking about how we bid out some of the chemicals by doing a reverse bid. This is the rest of the chemicals that the bidders didn't want to do the reverse bidding on. So we went out, we had 4 bidders submit costs. Hawkins Chemical came in low, just like on the reverse bid. You can see there's a slight savings over last year. I want to be careful of saying that. That's also depending on water and wastewater usage. So if we have higher water and wastewater usage this year, our costs will obviously go up. So it goes up and down. And it's a unit cost contract, so it goes up and down with how much water we use. Our recommendation is to award the contract in entirety to Hawkins Chemical. Is there any questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Moved by Brian, seconded by Bob. Roll call, please.
Fessner.
Yes.
Weber.
Yes.
Kulkaitis.
Yes.
Folk.
Yes.
Mund.
Yes.
Lencioni.
Yes.
Gem.
Yes.
Petrella.
Yes.
Wirball.
Yes.
Thank you very much. 5M, a recommendation to approve an ordinance authorizing the City of St. Charles to borrow funds from the IEPA Public Water Supply Loan Program for interconnection of well number 8 expansion.
So this is a recommendation for a loan ordinance. This is the next step. This is actually awarding the loan itself. We'll be coming back next couple months after the projects go to bid. As part of the EPA's process, we'll go to bid, get final costs, and then come back to the City Council and ask for an actual award of the loan. This is the ordinance, so that way we can continue the application phase to stay in line for the funding. As a reminder, this project is to help with capacity. Currently, the city's water system is about 970,000 gallons per day under capacity. So that means we need additional wells and additional treatment. This project will drill another well and utilize an existing treatment plant if we had extra capacity too. So we're drilling a well near this location. running a raw water line all the way to this treatment facility and treating it at that treatment facility. The treatment facility is out on the eastern part of town near the DuPage Airport area. It's called Well 8. It will be a deep well. The deep well and the raw water main and the treatment upgrade are currently out to bid, and we'll be bringing 2 of those 3 items to next government services and the third one, the following one after that. Any questions?
Thank you. Do you foresee this taking care of our water needs on the east side for extended period of time, or with all the development we have going on?
So I think what we'll do is after May, we're going to be coming back every couple of months just to educate everyone on the water system. The water system is a little different than the wastewater system. It's all connected except for the inner zone. This will help with the capacity, but I can get in a little more detail when I start talking about actually how the water system works.
Thank you.
So, Tim, this is just, as you've explained, the step in the process with the IEPA in order to get in line for the funding. So the $17.5 million right now is just an estimate.
Just an estimate, yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Move for approval?
I'll second.
Motion by Brian, second by Steve. Roll call, please.
Fessner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Kulkaitis?
Yes.
Folks?
Yes.
Munn?
Yes.
Lencioni?
Yes.
Gem?
Yes.
Petrella?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Thank you. Moving on to item 5N, recommendation to approve a resolution awarding the bid for hauling services.
Good evening. We recently opened our bid for hauling services. We received 3 qualified bidders, with Marcotte Enterprises, Villa Park being the lowest responsible bidder. This contract is used across all 3 operating divisions of the Public Works Department. We're hauling mostly spoils from excavation sites such as water main breaks, stump grindings, or sewer point repairs. Marcotte is an extension of Schroeder Trucking, who has been our hauling contractor in the past, and they've proven they have sufficient resources and staff to do the work we need.
Questions?
No. I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Steve, seconded by Bob. Roll call, please.
Fessner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Kulkaitis?
Yes.
Folks?
Yes.
Munn?
Yes.
Lencioni?
Yes.
Gem?
Yes.
Petrella?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
That brings us to item 5O, recommendation to approve a resolution awarding the bid for stone and gravel material.
Previous item had to do with hauling away the spoils from the excavation. This one is backfilling the excavation. So stone and gravel is used, again, across all 3 divisions to fill the hole. We received, again, 3 qualified bids for this project, or this ongoing service. Landscape Material and Firewood Sales of West Chicago was our lowest responsible bidder. They have not provided stone for us in the past, but they have provided mulch and done our hauling for us in the past, and they've done well.
Questions? Looking for a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Bob, seconded by Brian. Roll call, please.
Fessner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Kulkaitis?
Yes.
Folks?
Yes.
Munn?
Yes.
Lencioni?
Yes.
Gem?
Yes.
Petrella?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Thank you. 5P, a recommendation to award the bid for a 3-year contract for landscape maintenance services.
We retooled our landscape maintenance contract this year to incorporate all of our properties comprehensively, including the new First Street sites. We packaged it into a 3-year contract. Again, full spectrum, so if there's turf, it includes mowing, it includes deadheading, litter pickup, edging, mulching. We received 6 responses to this bid solicitation, with Yellowstone Landscape of Bunnell, Florida, being the lowest responsible bidder. Yellowstone is a national firm. Our account will be serviced out of their Roselle location. They currently provide our tree planting services for us, and they provided a list of similar scope projects at a municipal scale in the Chicagoland area.
Yeah.
Okay. Are they new? Is this company new?
They are not new. I think they've been acquiring a lot of smaller landscape.
No, I'm saying this is new for us, this new contract,
Yeah,
this is a new company?
They currently do our tree planting. So
Okay.
this would be the first time they do turf maintenance.
So this is
or-
not the company that was cutting the prairie grass, the nature, you remember the mistake that they're
Correct.
gone?
They are
Okay.
very gone.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're, okay.
Yes, different company.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion by Brian, seconded by David. Roll call, please.
Bessner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Kulturitis?
Yes.
Folk?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Montioni?
Yes.
Gem?
Yes.
Petrola?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Thank you. That brings us to 5Q, a recommendation to approve a resolution authorizing a construction contract for Prairie Street resurfacing project. Hello, Chris.
Good evening. Last year, the Environmental Services Group replaced the sanitary main and water main on Prairie Street between Randall and 13th. They did a temporary roadway surface to get us through the winter as a late season repair. This year, we will be milling down that surface and putting down a proper asphalt surface, smooth driving surface, new striping, and doing sidewalk and curbway repairs. This is funded in part through the STP LAFO program, which will fund 75% of our project up to $500,000. Builders Paving was the low bidder out of 6 bidders. They last worked in St. Charles in 2016, but they work regularly in the area, including Geneva and Elk Grove and a number of other municipalities.
Thank you. Question?
I'll just say that I'm super excited to get this project done. Being in the 5th Ward, me and Ed have received lots of emails about residents saying, I can't believe that that's the way you guys finish the road. That's how it's going to be. And I'm like, no, that's not how it's going to be. So, yes, I approve. I'm very excited. Thank you.
Comment to piggyback a little bit, is there any way construction can get started before May and get done before school starts?
It will be done before school starts. The final completion is in October, but it's beginning of October, early October. So before we have any real problems there.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Motion by Steve, second by Brian. Roll call, please.
Bessner?
Yes.
Weber?
Yes.
Kulturitis?
Yes.
Folk?
Yes.
Lund?
Yes.
Montioni?
Yes.
Gem?
Yes.
Petrola?
Yes.
Wirball?
Yes.
Thank you, that passes. That brings us to item 5R, Illinois Municipal Electric Agency Contract Questions and Answer Discussion with Peter. Good evening. I believe we have video.
Thank you. I didn't know if it was set up yet or not.
Or presentation.
Appreciate it. I didn't know you were the one doing it. But now I do. Could be a video. Yeah. We're ready to go. Thank you. Okay, good evening. We just got through 16 items, I think, in 20 minutes, so I'll take the next 3 hours.
Okay, there you go.
The end of the alphabet there.
Yeah. So as you know, we've been asked to add this discussion to the agenda tonight to answer some questions and continue dialogue about the IMEA topic. If you don't object, I'll maybe give some brief opening comments and then open it up for conversation and questions after that.
Great.
Since we haven't talked about this in an open meeting for a while, I'll start with some background information just to get us all on the IMEA mindset again. So as you know, over the past 20 years, the City of St. Charles has received reliable, affordable, and sustainable electric power from the Illinois Municipal Electric Agency, IMEA. St. Charles is in the middle of a 30-year power sales contract with IMEA since 2004. It is set to expire in 2035. To plan for and ensure that the resources are in place and to continue meeting our community's long and short-term power and energy needs, IMEA is requesting that St. Charles consider approving and executing a new power sales contract with IMEA from 2035 to 2055, and I emphasize the word new because that has been confusing, and I'll get into that in a little bit more detail. Because of that request from IMEA, staff began preparing you for this decision over a year ago. To help explain what that looked like, this summary shows the preparation we've done together over that time. Looking back at my records, the first formal City Council notice of this agreement was back on January 12th, 2024. Since then, we have provided you with 14 City Council updates, an initial one-on-one discussion with each of you in January and February of 2024. It seems like a long time ago. 5 public committee meetings and a second round of one-on-one discussions with each of you in September of 2024. And several of you spent some time in late October visiting the Prairie State Energy Campus and IMEA headquarters, not to mention that this topic has been part of previous budget discussions, planning sessions, and other similar milestones over the past several years. In addition, there have been many questions asked and answered. We've held several meetings with other stakeholders, such as representatives from the Tri-City Clean Energy Consortium, other IMEA communities, residents, businesses, and industry experts such as Xterra Business, IMEA, Prairie State, and others. All along the way, staff has asked, what else can we provide to you to make this important decision for our community? And that obviously is still an open offer to you. So I look forward to our continued dialogue tonight, but before getting into that, let's briefly review what we've considered so far. So you have been informed that St. Charles has its own electric utility since 1892. That currently has over 15,500 customers with 32 dedicated staff, and that we keep the lights on with an average of 16.5 minutes to restore power when it goes out, compared to 1 hour and 44 minutes by the ComEd utility. You have also been informed that the St. Charles is part of a nonprofit joint action agency called IMEA, which was founded in 1984 with 31 other Illinois communities, and that IMEA has provided affordable, reliable, sustainable, predictable, and competitive wholesale energy to those communities ever since. IMEA is a transparent agency and has been formed and run by its members, which means St. Charles has direct local control of all decisions made by IMEA. So you also have been informed that the IMEA has built over decades a diverse portfolio which is leading Illinois, with 11% of our current energy coming from non-carbon emitting generating sources, and was built to protect against market volatility, and also has a sustainable plan for the future that at its core has a vision to reduce our power portfolio to have net zero carbon emissions delivered to its members by the year 2050. IMEA has already committed to decarbonization and has been transforming our portfolio since 2009. IMEA's current portfolio is 11% renewable energy. We're running faster than anybody in the state currently, and that's compared to the Illinois State Renewable Portfolio Standard, which is only somewhere between 7 and 9%. Renewable, in addition to that, IMEA has recently contracted two new solar resources, a 25 megawatt Big River solar plant and a 150 megawatt Bee Hollow solar plant. Once those projects are complete and online, expected in late 2026, IMEA's portfolio will be about 20% renewable energy, and that is if we don't find any other renewables until then, so a minimum of 20% at that point in time. So you have also been informed that IMEA is and will continue to be affordable. It's just simply a fact, it's shown by this chart that you've seen many times over, that the IMEA power supply rate or cost to St. Charles remains flat, and it's remained flat over the previous 10 plus years and is projected to stay flat in the future, really due to energy-owned facilities and long-term contracts. You have also been informed of why we are asking for your consideration of a new contract nearly 10 years away from when our current contract expires. And that is simply to continue to be able to secure low-price, long-term agreements to transition our current portfolio of energy to more renewable energy sources, really starting, I'd say starting today, but we've already started that journey. You have also been informed that you have a few other potential alternative sourcing options for supplying power to our community. But from mine and my staff's recommendation, there really is no viable reason to join another joint action agency, especially considering 40 years of success with IMEA. There really is no viable reason to form a new joint action agency, especially considering 40 years of success with IMEA. There's no viable reason for short-term agreements with openness to market volatility and price stability. And there is no reason to increase staff and resources just to say that we're doing it alone. There is, however, one viable solution, and that is to continue our long-term relationship with IMEA beyond 2035. For all of those reasons and more, when you have the information you need and when you are ready to take the formal action on this topic, staff will be providing you with the following recommendation: to approve a power sales contract with the IMEA commencing on October 1st, 2035. So before we get into some questions, I'd like to address, excuse me, hopefully my voice makes it through tonight. I'd like to address some of the comments that we've heard recently and some questions you have provided with us in advance of tonight's meeting. Staff has really appreciated the public feedback so far. That is important, as you know, in your decision making, and we welcome more public involvement as you desire and direct us to do. However, whether purposely or not, there's a lot of misinformation or misunderstanding of statements. There are some things that are set out of context, which is certainly understandable considering the complexity and sensitivity of this topic. So I'd like to just, for a few clarifications from our perspective for your consideration in no particular order. First, some basic facts that are sometimes misstated. Based on our base load generation, which is about 120 megawatts of peak power, St. Charles represents about 12% of IMEA's total generation load, 12%. We are the second highest load in IMEA behind Naperville, which is about 3 times the size of us. And St. Charles does not directly own its generation sources. St. Charles directly does not own a coal plant or any of our generation sources. IMEA does. So IMEA owns about 12% of Trimble County generating stations, and IMEA owns about 15% of Prairie State Generating Company. The Prairie State Generating Company is the cleanest coal-fueled power plant in Illinois, and one of the cleanest coal-fueled power plants in the world. Prairie State Generating Company does not cause 76 deaths a year. Prairie State will not shut down any earlier if St. Charles does not continue its arrangement with IMEA. That's just simply a fact. We are too small in that organization to make an impact on the decision from Prairie State. So, shifting gears a little bit about the contract itself. It has been incorrectly implied that over the life of the new 20-year contract with IMEA, that St. Charles will pay IMEA about $800 million. That's not exactly accurate and taken a little bit out of context, so let me explain. In 2024, the calendar year 2024, St. Charles reimbursed IMEA a total of $40,594,075.29 for really 3 separate things. First, IMEA, under the power sales agreement, is our agent who has full responsibility for planning and obtaining an adequate supply of power and energy for the city of St. Charles. That is the vast majority of the roughly $40 million expense, is really obtaining the power needed for St. Charles and the other members in IMEA. Second, IMEA is also responsibility for the transmission of power to our city, which is the second largest expense of the roughly $40 million that St. Charles pays annually. No, by the way, $40 million has been pretty stable for St. Charles over the past decade or so. And third, just like most other agencies, as you could imagine, IMEA has administrative and general A&G costs for things like paying their employees' salaries, insurance costs, building and office expenses, consultant contracts, and other similar normal costs of doing business. In fact, of the 32 staff members at IMEA, along with all the administrative and general consultant costs, outside legal costs, memberships, member services that they provide to us, and other related costs total to only about 2.8% of all IMEA expenses. So what that means is that St. Charles pays IMEA to perform all of these duties and to pay their staff about $1.1 million annually. When compared to other regional joint action agencies, most of our joint action agency peers are in the 4 to 8% range compared to 2.8% for IMEA. So, in a nutshell, St. Charles is getting a pretty good deal for all of the expenses, all of the expertise we receive from our partners at IMEA. And a reminder, all of those expenses are not for profit. IMEA's goal is not to make money on their investments. They are a pass-through organization to their members, including St. Charles. They are a not-for-profit organization. So going back to the numbers, as a baseline, we can all agree that using about $400 million annually for 20 years is about $800 million. That's where that figure comes from. However, whether St. Charles is affiliated with IMEA or not, from 2035 to 2055, St. Charles will be spending at least $800 million on our power and transmission needs over that time. Based on IMEA's current position in the market and very predictable long-term contract positions in the market, and also predictable long-term positions in the market in 2035, compared to the unknowns of an open market and short-term contracts, St. Charles may spend a lot more than $800 million in that same time frame if St. Charles is not part of the IMEA from 2035 to 2055. So, switching gears, but also related to contract language, there is some confusion regarding making this decision 10 years in advance, or 5 years in advance, or 7 years in advance of the current contract expiring. And somehow that relates to St. Charles getting penalized if we don't take action now. So to start, one important distinction to note is that IMEA is asking its current members to consider a new contract from 2035 to 2055. Even though the new contract is very similar to our current contract, this is not an extension of the current contract, and therefore our current contract does not really tie to the next contract in really any way. For example, our current contract has a 5-year notice provision, which gives either the member, St. Charles, Naperville, Winnetka, pick a member, or IMEA, the right to terminate the contract on September 30th, 2035. Nowhere in the current power sales contract is there a provision giving any member an option to extend or renew that contract beyond September 30th, 2035. The contract ends on that date. It also does not provide any guarantee that the terms and condition of any new power sales agreement is offered to the members and will remain the same after the expiration of the current power sales contract. Nevertheless, IMEA has offered a new power sales contract to all of its current members, and that offer is open now, but will close on April 30th, 2025, in several weeks from now. So when you hear that St. Charles will be penalized financially if we don't renew our contract, that's just false. First of all, it's not an extension or renewal contract. It's a new contract. I've also heard it called and referred to as an opportunity contract. So maybe another way to maybe look at this at really an opposite way than how it's usually described as a penalty. The opportunity members who make the commitment to sign up during the open period should not have their costs potentially increased by members who did not sign up during the open period, but instead wish to sign up later when costs are expected to have risen during that interim. Making members that do not sign up during the open period pay higher costs than their costs that their delay causes is not a financial penalty. It is a recognized economic principle in the electric industry called cost causation. In simple terms, the cost causer pays. So that works to protect St. Charles too. If we choose to sign the new contract, for example, and let's say Geneva has an opportunity to sign up with IMEA 5 years from now, the IMEA can consider Geneva joining that agreement. However, if that causes extra costs to have Geneva sign up at IMEA at that time at a future date, those costs should not be transferred to those who are already part of IMEA. So it's there to protect those who sign up on an opportunity base, and that's what St. Charles has today in front of them. Also related to the contract, we fielded some questions about the differences between the power sales contract and membership contract, or sometimes we call that the agency agreement. We'd like to reserve most of those responses for later when our city attorney is present, but a few things I can leave with you tonight in regards to the agency agreement. So if St. Charles does not sign a new power contract with IMEA for 2035, we could remain an IMEA member, interestingly enough. However, it just wouldn't make sense for either St. Charles or to IMEA that we would do so. There's really no reason to be part of an organization that you're not receiving any power from. So we would most likely terminate that agreement, and that would certainly be our recommendation to do so, and that's a fairly easy process to get to. One important reason to terminate the membership contract and also the power sales agreement in 2035, if we don't want to continue forward, would to avoid any further or potential liability for decommissioning. So if we don't have any agreements with IMEA beyond 2035, we want to get out of all those agreements so that we don't have any liability to decommissioning. One thing about decommissioning, the estimated decommissioning costs of Prairie State and Trimble County will be collected prior to the end of the existing power sales contract by 2035. So right now we are funding a fund to carry the costs for the decommissioning of both of those coal plants today, and that will remain for the next 10 years up until the end of 2035. There is no issue or anticipated environmental cleanup costs associated with coal ash or any other byproduct at Prairie State and Trimble County. They are fully compliant with all existing state and federal laws. Okay, so that's enough about the contract, but changing gears once again, just a quick update on Naperville. Several months ago, the City of Naperville City Council, as directed by their Public Utilities Advisory Board, and the City Council hired Customized Energy Solutions, CES, who is a qualified energy market consulting firm to identify and evaluate options associated with providing energy management services and associated ancillary services for Naperville's municipally owned electric utility, similar to ours. Well, specific to Naperville, much of the information in the Naperville study will apply to St. Charles. St. Charles staff can certainly evaluate the Naperville study when it's available and apply reasonable assumptions and correlations to St. Charles, and we can get that back to you. CES presented its initial findings to Naperville's Public Utility Board on March 6th. That slide deck and recording of that presentation is available to you and the public on the Naperville's website. It is our understanding now that CES will finalize their actual report and provide a recommendation to Naperville at the next Utility Advisory Board meeting, which is scheduled for April 8th, 2025. Just like our public meetings, their packet information for that meeting will be available to the public a couple of days in advance, and that will include that report as well. So I know that's a lot of information. With that, I will certainly open it up to additional questions, comments, or simple discussion.
Who wants to lead off?
I'll start.
Mr. Besner.
Thank you, Peter. That's a very quick and succinct presentation. I appreciate the information. There's 31 communities, I think you said, and I thought I read somewhere we're in the 20s now, meaning how many have already signed up? Do you know that exact number?
It is my understanding, well, I know for certain that 25 are signed up and approved by IMEA board. I understand that there is one for certain and probably two more that will be ready for our next IMEA board meeting.
Okay.
In April.
And then regarding Naperville, is it
April?
Is it your expectation with Naperville that they'll make the deadline? Or, I mean, what's your gut telling you, I guess?
I don't know if I would comment or speculate that on that. I know that they have this important meeting on the 8th, coming up here in just another week or so. And depending on that information and the desire of the city council to absorb that information quickly or not, will all depend on whether they get that to city council and make an attempt to approve it or not.
And is it, again, I'm not trying to ask you questions you don't have answers to, but is it your gut that there's a little leeway there if for whatever reason the vote gets delayed by a month or two? I mean, I guess I'm just trying to see where we're going to be at if we're following in their footsteps, at least time-wise.
Yeah, so right now, I guess I'll be real direct and then but maybe pull back from that and talk a little bit about reality, hopefully. But the direct answer to that is no, there's no leeway. What's set in stone right now is April 30th, 2025. We make a decision by then. Beyond that date, then really what would happen is that St. Charles, if we chose to, move forward at a later date, whether it's a month later or a year later or 3 years later, would in essence have to go back to the IMEA membership and ask them if they would accept our proposal to join them. And then there would be a vote.
Okay. And then if we don't sign this contract by chance, where does that put us in? We have a contract with them through 2035. I was speaking to you a little bit about this. Talk about the open market or that timing between now and 2035, I guess. What would our options be? And I'm more so interested, are we going to be in a situation where we're going to get power from another source that may still be, I don't know, coal-driven, for lack of a better word, I guess? I guess as staff, if we don't make this decision or quite frankly make the decision in the next year or so that we are not going to move forward with IMEA, then we probably will be in front of you very quickly to explore the things that you see on the screen right now and what are our other options and alternatives. So, and then if we were to sign that contract, do you see us literally in 20 or 30 years in a situation where we will have, abundant, consistent, reliable, cost-efficient electricity from a number of alternative, renewable resources if they're out there?
That is very clearly the goal of IMEA, is to get to 100% renewable energies by 2050 or 2055 in that range. Now, whether physically our state and our country can get there is a whole different discussion and dialogue.
Could you say that again as loudly as possible, sir? I think that's one thing that we haven't heard enough of yet. Because, that's the first time I heard that. Could you say that again for me, please?
So, our goal
Who's
Our sustainability plan, Illinois Municipal Electric Agency, 32 communities, which is represented by one board member in each community, passed the sustainability goal. And that goal is to be 100% renewable, actually I should say 100% carbon-free by 2050, 2055. That's our sustainability plan. Now, whether the state of Illinois and this country will be ready for that is a whole different discussion and topic, and some speculation, I would guess.
Okay, because one last question. Because there are, we've all received emails in regards to this issue overall, and what concerns me a little bit is the fact that some of the statements that were made is, what's the hurry, or slow the process down. I'm not advocating for one or the other. I'm just repeating what I've read. And at the same time, let's give it a chance to see what may or might be out there. And that's my concern, is because I'm not 100% confident, not that there's renewables out there, but that are abundant, that are going to be consistent and provide reliable electric service. Because over the last 20 years that I've lived here, I will say we've had, little peaks, but we've had really, really good, reliable electrical service. And that's what's important to the residents, and that's what's important for me.
So the one thing that I might just suggest is that, quite interestingly enough, is what's out there and what's available and what's the most sustainable and predictable and cost-effective and sustainable energy out there. IMEA has been doing that as our agent for 40 years.
Sure.
For 20 years for St. Charles, but 40 years in their life. So IMEA is our agent that does that, and they'll continue to do that with our guidance.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Peter, thank you for the presentation and answering all these questions. I greatly appreciate it. I'm going to throw a hypothetical. You can answer how you want, but let's just say we did sign the agreement, and 7 years from now, a new renewable energy source shows up. So let's just say Dick Hale all of a sudden has an SMR, a small modular reactor that they stand up, it's up and running, and they have extra megawatts for us. Is there anything that would not allow us to be able to get some of that renewable energy?
So I think, again, since you're talking hypothetical, what I would suggest is that if there is a new energy, let's just say it's clean, renewable energy that is fully available to St. Charles and to our state, and it is cost effective, then it will also be available to IMEA. And if it's more cost effective than our coal plants and readily available, then just simply from a business perspective, IMEA and its members, and quite frankly, all of the members of Prairie State, will be shedding their exposure to coal and expensive energy and moving to this hypothetical energy source that's available.
Gotcha. And then one follow-up question would be, what if St. Charles, if someone wanted to put a solar field in St. Charles on available land, and then it connects it to our grid, we can use that energy as well, correct? As part of the new contract, which is actually new for the 2035 agreement, St. Charles and all of the other IMEA communities can, in essence, purchase their own renewable energies differently than any other community in IMEA, up to 10% of our existing generated load. Thank you, Peter.
So we can do that, yes.
I have a couple questions, but mostly I have comments in providing feedback. Because this has been a tough conversation, and there are parts of the conversation that I think could have gone better. I think there's things that the community doesn't know. Because I think, Pete, and you and I have talked, I think that there's nobody in this room that actually wants to buy energy from coal. I mean, you said it the first time. This is the first time I've heard anything said about IMEA having, clean energy goals, and I think it hasn't come across. I think that we should be talking as much about that as possible, because I don't think that it comes across and I said something before, because you sit on the board at IMEA as a representative of St. Charles, but we're St. Charles, and a lot of times you say we when you're talking about IMEA, and it comes across in this conversation in a way that doesn't help the conversation. Because we have a lot of options on what to do with our energy future, and if we go in another direction, I doubt you're going to be on that board anymore. We have to look out for St. Charles and listen to the people that are here, because nobody wants to buy energy from coal. However, as much as we don't want to, I think you make some great points about whether we want to or not. How much is that going to affect the world? Because we all want to be part of a solution, but nobody here wants to do something irresponsible, like exposing ourselves to, energy that fails our businesses to the point that our city crumbles, that, we have rolling blackouts in our city or whatever horrible things might happen from it. And I don't think that we've talked enough about that. I don't think that the community is really clear on the fact that IMEA isn't a company that, they're an organization, but they're not a for-profit company. It's just an extension of us, that whatever happens, we get a vote. You get, a large say on how they want to operate going forward. I don't think that people know it. You saying that, that we'd like to get to 100% sustainable by, what was the goal?
2050.
2050. That's super admirable. And I don't think that those are things that have gotten into the community, to the way that they have, because I think that the community's done a good job telling us, they'd really like to not get power from coal. However, we are going to have to understand that's not realistic right now. Even if we went with ComEd, we wouldn't be providing any additional benefit to the world, because they have a higher percentage of coal usage to produce energy, correct?
It's not a yes or no question, so, unfortunately,
they're not significantly different. They don't have a huge green energy portfolio that we're not taking advantage of in ComEd. Is that correct?
Their renewable energy portfolio is less than ours currently.
There you go. That's the answer that I was looking for.
Right. And it's not ComEd. ComEd is a utilities company, just like St. Charles. So It's the customers of ComEd.
Exactly, right, which highlights that this is a complex question. So my point is the more that as we have this conversation, if we can simplify it, I think that that's helpful, and make this to a point where we can kind of approach it and recognize that we've heard that the citizens of St. Charles, the elected officials of St. Charles, really don't want to buy energy produced by coal. However, it might be the only possible way. There's no way of getting away from it. Just look to simplify the conversation, as much as possible, and with that also, there's one thing that I've asked for and I want you to hear, and this is everything that I've got, is before I vote on this contract, I have to see a pro forma that says, what are our other options? And there's a little bit of a beginning to that from the Naperville study, which I actually have up on my computer right now, but I want to know, like nuts and bolts, what do we have to do? Like how much of it, I need to see that, leaving IMEA is irresponsible, so I have to see what the other options are. And I think as much as nobody wants to buy energy produced by burning coal, I think everybody in here also understands the risks of, not running our city, So just as much as possible, simplify the situation, simplify these answers, make sure we have a good pro forma before we get to a spot where we need to take this vote. Those are the things that I'm asking for. Thanks, Peter. I really appreciate it. It's a tough situation for all of us.
Sure.
David.
Pardon me. So, ComEd gets, from your understanding, its power from Constellation, correct?
A portion from Constellation, yeah. They're a big provider to ComEd customers, yes.
Okay, so, and they're all nuclear, so they don't have any power or coal plants in their fleet, correct?
They do have coal resources in their portfolio, and again,
mostly nuclear, though.
They do have a lot of nuclear, yes.
Just a quick question on that. What did we do before IMEA existed? How did St. Charles get its electricity?
We, in essence, received it from ComEd. Back then, it was, they were not a wires company only. They also supplied and had the generation sources, which have now been transferred over to Constellation. So that was our primary source of energy prior to the IMEA contract. That was before a thing called deregulation happened, and they split both of these, basically the power makers and the wires companies.
And then you said the process for what it was called the agreement, agency agreement. When the gentleman from IMEA came in, one gentleman mentioned there was like a statutory process, but it's pretty quick, it's not lengthy, is it? Or do you,
No,
you don't have to go into detail now, but.
It's basically like getting a resolution approved at City Council.
Okay.
It's not a very long or lengthy process to do so.
Okay. That's all I have, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you for this, Pierre. I appreciate the review and the reminder, especially for people that are on the meeting and in the meeting, so they can see some of this information that we have seen a couple of times. I am a little confused about the ownership of the Prairie State campus, because I've heard several different things, and even tonight I'm not 100% clear, because you were saying that there is no ownership by the city, but then talk about how we are responsible for decommissioning. So if we don't have any ownership, why do we have a responsibility to pay towards decommissioning something we don't have any ownership in? Can you help me understand that?
So we don't have a direct ownership. We have an indirect ownership through IMEA. So IMEA is our agent.
And they
have a direct ownership in Prairie State. So IMEA as an agency owns, I think it's 12%, 15%, somewhere in there, of Prairie State. So as a user of that over the past 20 years, and then again another 10 years to come up by 2035, IMEA as an agency is doing the right thing by creating a fund to decommission that coal plant. IMEA would be responsible for only 15% of the total decommissioning of the plant. I believe there's seven other owners of Prairie State beyond IMEA, and they would be also responsible for funding that decommission at the ownership level that they own.
Okay.
So it's just simply IMEA as an agency is doing the right thing by preparing for the future, just like you would start a college fund for your kid to be ready for what we know is going to happen in by 2055 at the latest.
And that 2055 date is based on the CEJA regulation.
Well, if you look really closely at our sustainability plan, it mirrors the CEJA. So yes, there's no secret in those two matching up really pretty closely.
So theoretically, if there were changes to CEJA, it doesn't necessarily have to end in 2055. That could be extended out. If there's legislation that says that CEJA can be extended another 10, 15, 20, 30 years, that Prairie State campus could continue to operate beyond that 2055 date if legislatively it's allowed to.
We're going to watch that every year and make decisions and resource decisions based on all of that information that comes in. And one way that I've explained that before is that it goes both ways. We could actually get there quicker also. Just because our sustainability plan, and you'll see that the snake diagram in the right-hand corner, we've reviewed that before. A great example is something that's already happened. We created this just about a year ago, and we're already advancing quicker than what our plan says. So if you see there in 2025 to 2026, at a 130 megawatt solar plant, we're adding a 150 megawatt solar plant, because when we went out to the market and we received bids for several different solar plants. The one that was available had 150 megawatts, and they said, "Do you want it all?" And we said, "Yes." So that's, you know, that's why the sustainability plan can work both ways, and you can get there faster. But that's all. Those are all things that are going to have to continually being adjusted, really similar to a strategic plan that the city approves. Annually, every few years, we look at it and we adjust it based on all of those conditions.
And that makes sense to me. I guess I would just question if the legislation changes and allows the plant to stay open longer, if you have 12% ownership in such a plant, why would you close that plant instead of allowing it to continue to operate? And I guess that is a concern that people have, is there is no guarantee that we are actually going to be bound by that date. I understand that we are purchasing all these renewables and that these are things that are happening, but I think you see where the line of questioning is going on this, that if you're an owner in something and you're not being forced to shut it down, the expectation would be that you would consider utilizing and selling that same power.
For that type of discussion, I like to look at the bigger picture, and that's why I say things like whether St. Charles is part owner of IMEA and therefore part owner of Prairie State in 2050, and it extends beyond that, Prairie State will be open whether St. Charles is part of it or not. So St. Charles, quite frankly, Naperville, St. Charles, and Winnetka together, quite frankly, IMEA is only 15% of Prairie State coal plant, will not really affect how that plant manages its assets as time goes on.
Okay.
We're just too small in that game.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. I have another question. In just looking around at some other municipalities, I see that Oswego gets 100% of their power from renewable sources through ComEd. And I know that that's set up differently than us, and I didn't know if you could help me understand why we wouldn't be able to also get a delivery of 100% renewables if that was what we wanted to do. They're a larger community than we are, and I don't believe they own their own electric utility. I'll be honest, I didn't dig into all of the specifics in that, but I'm trying to understand how to explain that to residents who ask me questions like that, when we know that there are communities in the immediate vicinity that do get 100% renewable energy.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to speak specifically for that community, but I have also heard that other communities do that, and typically, from my understanding, is that a lot of times you can just buy RECs to get your community to 100% renewable energy. So your costs will go up to say that you have basically a piece of paper, a REC, that renewable energy credit, that guarantees that your community can say that it's fully renewable. That doesn't necessarily mean that those communities have solar and wind and renewable plants that they own, that they operate, that they run through another agency like IMEA. There are other ways to get there, and the RECs are one way that I've heard that's being done.
Yeah. Okay, I just have one more. So today there was an article in the New York Times talking about an increase in demand for coal in the last year by 1% globally due to urgent demands for electricity because of global warming, because people are looking to avoid heat stress and air conditioning needs. There's just a rise in that global demand. But that also 80% of new electric generation was coming from renewables and nuclear. So I guess I'm trying to understand how, because of these changes and the way that things change so quickly, how we are able to look at what we are going to need in 10 years and what is going to be available to us and what technologies are going to exist. How can we actually look at this and say with confidence that we are making the best possible decision for our community without knowing what those things are going to be that are going to be available. You know, we are potentially in, 30 days or so signing a contract that tells us we are bound by what the other 31 municipalities want to do, without really understanding what other opportunities there might be. In 5 years, there might be something completely different for us to take a look at, and that might be necessary for our community if, say, we decide we want to build a large data center or want to have a hub for electric vehicles or things that will take even more power requirements than what we can currently support. I guess I'm just trying to understand how we can plan out so far ahead when it sounds from what some of the other talks that I've been to around town about this, that some of the consultants say that it's very difficult to plan so far ahead. But we're being asked to do that, or just to rely on the expertise from this one agency.
I don't know if I have a response to that. It's more of a statement, and certainly something that you'll have to juggle with. And we could continue to research that, obviously, and get you more information or experts that are better equipped to answer that. But what I might say is that I think no matter what agency you go to or open market, you're probably going to have those same considerations. IMEA, again, is an agent for St. Charles, and if there are opportunities that St. Charles wants to pursue, like more renewable energies, or if we have data centers coming into St. Charles, most likely all of the other communities that are associated with IMEA are going to be dealing with the same type of issues and challenges, and so we'll all be working through that together. That's been our history with IMEA.
Okay, thank you.
I'll go. Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. A couple of comments. On the agenda tonight, we approved several items with competitive bids, and they're not 10-year before the contract expired. I feel like we're rushing into this. In my opinion, we should have had this conversation should have been had last year, so we're not under the gun in 30 days to approve this contract one way or another. Another thing with the contract, I understand they have their sustainability goals, but those I think should have been benchmarks. If they don't meet this particular megawatts of renewable by this particular date, then we should be able to say, okay, we get to go out and find the renewable energy on our own to make up the difference, but it's not in the contract. I just, as I said before, I don't have enough information yet to vote on a 10-year contract before the contract's up, and then for another 20 years. It's information for me, and I don't have it. I don't have the Naperville study. I don't have any of this information, and by the time we get it, we'll have maybe a week to decide. So I have concerns about it. Thank you.
So this is a perfect segue. How quickly, if you wanted to Ron's question, Ron's concern, so if you have, here's the recommendation, what we believe you're going to have from IMEA and extension. How quickly, using the current data that we have, how quickly could a comparison of whatever the 3 or 5 recommended potential providers might be, how quickly could something like that be put together? And again, nobody's got a crystal ball. Nobody's going to say it's going to be, but how quickly could a comparable picking whatever options you wanted to pick be done? Is that a 30 days, 60, 6 months? How long would that be able to be? How long would that take?
I think I kind of throw it back to say, well, what really is that scope? What are we really studying? But to try to generalize it a little bit, assuming that you're saying let's hire a consultant that can give us a third-party independent review of some of these considerations. Maybe we're just looking at options itself, right? So that's what Naperville is doing. They're looking at the options, and they actually had talked with their utility board and their city council about, well, let's take that a step further and think about cost projections, because that's another thing that, you know, that Ron just mentioned. You know, how do I know what the costs of these options are going to be in 2035 and beyond? You know, that's a different type of consultant that probably looks at those futures and predicts maybe several different scenarios on what costs might be in the future. So depending on how complicated you get that study and how many questions you want to answer, you know the process for the way we do business. We have to set up a proposal. We have to kind of bid that in the open market. That might take 2 to 3 months to get there. By the time you get the consultant on board, they're going to want 6 months to perform their initial studies, and then you know, a month after that to kind of run through their drafts and their initial comments and finalize it. It could be up to a year. Could we expedite it? Sure.
Oh, Peter, thank you for your presentation. I've got notes written everywhere, so I'm just going to kind of go through them. So the sustainability plan that we have, or that IMEA has, says that we're supposed to be carbon-free by 2050, correct? Is that the goal in the end?
Yes.
Okay. So are they still pursuing, I brought this up before, are they still pursuing carbon capture? They had a letter of interest. Are they done with that, or is that part of, is the IMEA still pursuing that?
Yeah, so IMEA never pursued it. You know, again, that might have been just one of those things that has gotten out there. And IMEA, it's by itself, its agency, has never approved a carbon capture or really even supported that. Now, what they have done is they said if a third party or research organization like the University of Illinois wants to come in and study carbon capture as an option for the future, then why would we stop that progress, right? Why would we stop that initiative in studying what that looks like? It doesn't hurt anybody to go as far as you can with studying a new technology. You always have the opportunity to stop that before it's actually built, or you commit dollars and time to that. So I guess that's probably the best way to explain IMEA's position is it doesn't hurt to continue that conversation, that study, to explore that option. But IMEA, as an agency, is not spending any money of their own and any of their resources in their own study in that.
Okay, because I'll just say that's a big concern of mine that I've expressed before, because when you have carbon capture, that means you can keep the coal plants alive, basically, is what happens. You can keep them running, you know, right? So for me, it's about risk. It's about liability. It's still in the experimental stage. So I'm not a supporter of that at all. So it's good to know they're not pursuing it. It would be nice if that was written in the contract. You know, I'm just saying. The other thing, it just sounds like a lot of this is they're going to move on with or without us, is what you're saying, is what it sounds like.
They had a minimum requirement. I think it was you know, a certain megawatt and 10 communities. They're well beyond that. So IMEA will exist from 2035 to 2055. That's set in stone by the contracts they already have.
So if we choose not to sign the new contract, apparently this is not a renewable, we're not extending the contract, we still have 10 years left with the existing contract.
That's correct.
Okay. My next question is to David's point earlier. He mentioned, what did we have before the IMEA? And you said we were with ComEd. That's when they had the power and the lines and all that stuff. So is that no longer, with the changes, is that no longer an option to explore? I think you showed a presentation a while, maybe it was in June, you showed us something like that.
It is an option, you know, and you'll see this in the Naperville report. This is something that they actually highlighted just a week ago at their initial presentation. That's a whole different conversation, because if St. Charles wants to be part of ComEd, then we can't have our own electric utility. Our electric utility in St. Charles goes away. ComEd in essence, the same as St. Charles because we are wires-only companies. So you can't have both.
I see, okay.
So we have not pursued that as a staff really at all because the feedback we've received over the past year and a half from everyone is we enjoy having our own electric utility. We're reliable. We keep the lights on. We get the lights on quicker than ComEd.
Sorry, can I?
Yeah,
But it is an option.
I'd like to finish, please. So yeah, I agree the service is great to have our own utility. There's definitely a benefit to that, so I didn't know that, so that's good. So my next question is, why not do what they call an RFI, request for information, like with NextEra, Constellation, to say, just get some feedback from them, you know, where they're at, what their thoughts are. Is that something we can do?
Yeah, I mean, I would throw it out there. We can do anything. It's just about, you know, what you'd like answers to, how much.
It's looking at it's basically, to Paul's point, to look at some options, just to know what are our options. And I don't know if that's how it's done, through an RFI or just request for information.
It might be as simple as just having them present.
Okay.
To start and see what they say.
And then you mentioned that the cities in the new contract, the communities can get renewables up to 10%. Is that the new?
That's correct.
So there's a cap on it up to what if you want to go more beyond 10%?
There is a cap in the contract. However, there is an open-endedness to that. So if St. Charles decided that, you know, they've gotten 10% of their own renewables, different than any other community, and they want to pursue even more, then they have the right to go back and get approval from the IMEA board to do that. So that's open-ended.
Okay. So we as a community have the opportunity to go beyond the 10% if we choose to, as St. Charles.
With IMEA's approval.
So what is the approval process like? How does that work?
I think that it looks like simply asking the IMEA to consider St. Charles has an interest in going to 15% renewables on our own. The IMEA staff would look at that and analyze it and determine if that would negatively affect the other IMEA members, positively affect the other IMEA members, or neutral. And they would provide that feedback to the members of IMEA at the time, and they'd vote. And they'd give you the approval or they wouldn't, probably based on staff's recommendation.
Okay, so the 10%, does that go up every year, or is it flat?
Nope. 10% is what's in the contract.
I know this is a big ask. I'm putting you on the spot. Is there any way for them to adjust or modify the contract to where there's an increment in there where we don't need approval, where it can go up, let's say 10% year one, maybe up to 15 year two? I'm just giving examples. I don't know what the number would be. Is that too big of an ask to see if that would help facilitate maybe some movement? Is that something you can ask?
I think that part of the reason for 10% also was not just simply a number and a placeholder. It was also kind of the reality of renewable energy in today's market. So just for example, we just signed our Bee Hollow 150 megawatt solar plant just in the past 6 months. We've been working on that agreement for 7 years. It's going to take 2 more years to build it. It's a 9-year commitment to get 150 megawatts of solar through the paces. Mm-hmm. So I think there's a reality of actually wanting to and getting there. And so I think they're just simply looking at it as, you know what, if a community is going full at it and they've got the resources and the desire to get there, then I think IMEA will want to help them succeed.
So that's a fair point to make, but why not have the language, you know, the attorneys work it out to where, hey, we can go up 15% the second year if, you know what I'm saying, you have conditions in it, if those renewables are available. You know what I'm saying? Like, why not have that flexibility for some communities that are a little more sensitive to coal and things of that nature?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying?
I can't say yes or no because the contract is what it is today.
Okay.
That's okay. You hit on something. So can you go back to Brian's question about the utility? So can you, in a day-to-day reality of if we don't have if we're not managing our own utility, if St. Charles doesn't have its own utility, to your average homeowner, to a business owner, the reality of what's the difference of us not managing our own utility and having that be, regardless of what the option might be, if we're not in control of that, what does that mean?
That means that if they have a power outage, they call ComEd and not the city of St. Charles. They get their utility bill through ComEd and not St. Charles. Everything to do is keeping the lights on and power, and all of the decisions about the resources is done through ComEd. And the Illinois I'm losing the name of it, but the agency that procures the power for ComEd, all of those decisions are made at that level and not at the community level.
I love having our own utility here in St. Charles. The service is incredible, the uptime, all of that is great, and I'd like to keep it that way. But my last question, and let somebody else take, is there a way we can get some sort of comparables or somebody just to come in and speak, just to kind of give us some ideas of what else is out there in RFI? Is that something we can do on a relatively short notice?
I think if you're talking about options, that is exactly what is coming out of the Naperville report.
Okay.
I think that's a good start, and that will be available in 7 days. So we can take a look at that, and then after that, if you want more, perhaps, or something a little bit more tailored to St. Charles, we can look at that.
But like, let's say NextEra comes in, or a Constellation Energy rep, could they come in under a request for information, just explain what they offer, or how that would work? And I don't even know how that would work with IMEA. I'm not an expert in this utility regulations, but I'm just curious if that makes sense or not, or is it?
Yeah, so I guess I'll say I'm not an expert in how public meetings work. I should be by now, but can a third party come to a public meeting and simply present on an agenda item, or can they come at open session? I don't know how that would function.
Alderperson Marble, I certainly understand what you're asking, and I would like to have that discussion at a staff level, only because I don't want to present incomplete information, because it's not as simple as saying this group can come and say this is what our energy is going to cost. That will have impacts on our employee count and managing that within our own staff levels as well. So just a simple presentation by that group could potentially cause us to employ 10 more staff members to manage that. So I want to make sure when we're presenting that information, we have that comprehensive look at it, so you've got an apples-to-apples comparison. So if we can do just a little bit of discussion on the back end, and I do think that Naperville study is going to be a strategic base for that, so we can get a level of here are the options, and then we can dig in a little bit more to the ones that interest us or have potential impacts that are more beneficial to the city.
Okay, one more, and then I'm done. Could you inquire, because you have a relationship with Naperville and Winnetka on the IMEA board, could you ask them about the cap, the renewable cap? Is there's any interest on their end?
In doing more than that, 10%, sure.
Could you just ask them and see what they say? Yep. Thank you.
And just as a clarification, that study is 2 weeks out, not 1 week out. It's April 8th, not next week.
Sorry, April.
Just wanted to clarify, because I know everybody's interested in that date, and I just want to make sure that's clear.
Okay, thank you.
We keep in the Naperville study. What's coming out? Can you clarify, are they presenting just, here's everything, we found information, you have it now, make your decision, or are they making a clear recommendation for Naperville? Do you know?
The consultant is supposed to make a clear recommendation. So
okay.
It will have both. It will have all the options, kind of the pluses and minuses of each options, and then a final recommendation, and that's what's going to be presented that night.
Okay.
There's actually not a presentation from what I understand. The report will be in the packet. So there's actually not even a presentation to review the actual report. So it's just going to be a written document.
And they're giving just based on everything we found, based on all of this is what we think, yes or no, pretty much, or here's the better option.
They'll have a recommendation, that's what they say.
I believe the consultant's making a recommendation in letter form that will go to that board, that they will then either choose to forward on to their city council or not.
Right.
Okay. And we are going to see this?
Correct.
Okay.
You can see the slide presentation.
Right, I know that.
And it gives you a little hint as to what's coming. Right.
I don't want to say the frustration, but I think there is some within the community. I don't want to speak for
for everyone in the community, but I don't know if everyone's completely against being like IMEA is the best option. I think there are some people that might be the best option. It's just the gigantic unknown that's been throughout this whole thing of like Alderperson Sulkadis' point. I don't want to say the lack of information, but it just hasn't been like, here it is, all this for everybody to come and see. So if this is something that can be a little bit of that, and I'll be able to help make the decision more informed for us up here, and Mr. Lencioni's point as well, and to what everyone else has kind of said, I think that is what has been kind of lacking. And I think that is the one thing that people just, the clarity behind it, because of how big the decision is. So that's what I was wondering about. You know, is this going to be a recommendation? Is this going to be what it's going to be? Because yes, it can help lead us. It doesn't mean we have to follow it, but I think it can be a very nice tool for our community to see and for 10 of us to see as we make this decision going forward. But it does bring a little bit of a concern to me because they're asking by a certain date, we're going to get this information when, and then it's like, here you go, vote. And that's why I'm wondering, and I don't remember who brought it up because there's been a lot of great comments, why can't it go back to May? Why can't it go back to June? Why can't it? And I understand where they're coming from, but this is a big decision, and I get that they probably do understand the gravity of it, but at times I don't think they do. And I wish that they would just be more open to being like, okay, these communities are trying to make their best informed decision possible. They're finally getting the information they really need. Okay, another month, another 2 months. And I don't know if that's right, but it might just be something that might put minds at ease moving forward. I know you don't control that. I don't know if it can be something that can be expressed.
So let me, again, the deadline is that date, right?
Right.
But I might describe it as an administrative process. You know, just the way you described it, that if I guarantee that, don't guarantee, that's the wrong word. I'm pretty confident that if St. Charles, Naperville, and Winnetka need a few extra months to compare and contrast information that they have on that date and not use that extended time for more research and more studies and more information, then I think that the IMEA board would be understanding of that. Okay. And you would hope that we would get the competence to be able to have that type of administrative extension.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
You wouldn't happen to have an idea of what the study, which direction it might be leaning, would you? No?
No, thank you. We're going to wait 2 weeks.
They didn't put they didn't put anything in there.
I'm curious if you have, well, and I would assume as a sitting board member, you would know this, but I don't know if off the top of your head you do. How much time IMEA had to make the decision that they were going to bring this request forward to their members? So in the planning purposes, how much time did they take to get all of this together in order to decide that they were going to set forth this 10-year early renewal request and then set forth the deadline that they did for us?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question. You know, I think that if you asked some of them at the IMEA staff, they would say that it's been in the making for 10 years. As they talked about it, they knew that this time would come. And they even say that about the new contract from 2035 to 2055. Guess what? They're going to be in front of those communities in 2045 to have the same discussion, and the same questions are going to come up. Why now? It takes 10 years to get your resources in order in today's world. It's just that simple. And they're going to need to start planning if IMEA is going to continue beyond 2055, that process in 2045. So it's, some of them will say that it was always meant to be. Now, what I've been involved with, I was actually on they had a subcommittee for the contract. There were 6 or 7 of the IMEA board members that really formulated the next contract, and I was on that subcommittee. We started that about an hour before it became really public. Now, there was some discussion at that time, and some of these conversations were had, but not necessarily at public meetings, because what does it look like if 3 years ago I said, listen, we're developing a new contract within IMEA from 2035 to 2055, but we haven't even started that process yet, so I have no information to provide for you except just simply that. So it took us about a year to actually get the contract in order and in a position where it could be presented to the members and the public. So we've been working on it at least for 18 months or so in advance of when you first got eyes on it.
And I would just like to, as a statement, say that I'm very supportive of maintaining our own electric utility, being a large employer in the city, of the people that do the work for that. I like that we have people that are here, that live in the city, that work for the city. I think that that's a really important thing. I'm not personally interested in changing that model, but I do want to explore what opportunities we have as far as the power piece of that.
Yeah, go ahead, David. Sorry.
So just a quick clarification, and I apologize if I missed this, the cap that Brian brought up. And so when you mentioned that the members have an option to procure, are we talking then your staff would go out and buy the megawatts, or are we talking like build our own solar facility?
So the words I couldn't find in my head before is called member-directed resources. That's what they're calling it in the new contract. That doesn't ring a bell to me, so I have a hard time for making sense of that. But in essence, what that means is that if St. Charles said, you know what, St. Charles is interested in increasing our renewable portfolio just for St. Charles to 10% of our base load, IMEA would do that on our behalf. However, again, similar to sharing costs, St. Charles would be responsible fully for all of those costs associated with those renewables that will be directed towards St. Charles. So the IMEA staff time or any specialty consultants that they need or outside attorneys will all be facilitated through IMEA, but that would all be charged back to St. Charles solely. Not a single other member will have any responsibility towards what we want to do. And then when those resources come on board, IMEA will actually own those resources and manage them on our behalf as our agent, but we will get the full credit for those renewable resources in St. Charles.
But we have to pay for it.
We will pay for them. Yes.
Thanks.
Thanks, Pete. One of the things that I don't really understand is the challenge in providing just pro formas. Like, I don't expect them to be perfect, but I mean, I've put together pro formas in 2 weeks, you know, when I was running strategy for $1.5 billion sales, you know, to try and pick up $250 million worth of business, you know, and I just would like, what are the options? Okay, you know, somebody just went, let's just say, you know, NextEra. When's the last time you picked up a city similar to St. Charles? You know, when did you pick them up? What did the pricing look like? And what were the costs associated with changeover? You know, like a ComEd type solution. You're like, could we get them to buy our plan? You know, no, they wouldn't do it. What's the write-off there? What do their rates look like? Option 3, and just like these are the viable options put forward and put together a cost model. I know it's not going to be perfect, you know, but I mean, I do believe like in seeing, and I think that along with the Naperville study, when you take a look at, I think they did a really good job kind of spelling out some of the risks in cost, in you know, high demand times, low demand times, stability of cost, and then just kind of walk through it. Like I would never expect anything perfect, you know, but like what are the viable options, you know, and what are the pros and cons of each of those? I mean, and we can continue to talk about this between meetings, but I don't understand why that would be that big a challenge, especially considering, you know, I mean, just a framework of what those decisions would look like is what I'm asking for. Does that make sense?
Makes sense, and we can certainly do that. I might suggest that that's, you know, above and beyond my expertise in my department to project in future energy costs. So we would need a consultant, and most likely be working that consultant even through the finance department to help us manage that. So again, it's just another layer of what are you looking for to make this decision, and then we would have to decide, you know, who to get to help us perform that.
I think this sounds great, and I've in 10 calls that no include, I see Bill smiling over there, because I think he knows what I'm thinking too. So, that's really what it would look like, but we'll continue to talk, because that is something that I'd absolutely like to see. We'll work through it. Thank you, Pete.
Speaking of member-directed resources, so that's where that 10% cap is on that, the renewables? Okay. So something I was thinking about too is I'd like to see more local control, more of the municipalities having a say in this process. I don't want to micromanage it, of course, but I'd like more updates on where we're at, what we're doing, for us to make the decision on member-directed resources. Do we want to go 10%? Maybe you have the conversation, they say, you know, we're willing to raise the cap or something like that. But I just feel like, me personally, I'm in the dark with all of this and what's going on, and I know you do a great job down there representing us, but maybe there's a liaison up here, like for the History Museum or the Business Alliance, that participates and understands what's going on and comes back here and reports to us. So I guess where I'm going is, it probably doesn't even need to be in the contract, but for us, I think it needs to be more of a commitment with local control for us making some decisions up here, but that's more of a comment. I don't know how other communities feel.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fair question, and one that we've answered before, and I am 100% in support of that. You know, traditionally speaking, and what's so interesting is that the reliability is so good in St. Charles that nobody thinks about the power. We don't have to talk about it, and that doesn't necessarily mean we shouldn't, because we should. But historically speaking, we just haven't brought anything back to you in that regard. So I am 100% on board with giving quarterly updates, every government services meeting, every time we have a board meeting at IMEA, presenting what we talked about and the decisions that were made, the decisions that are coming up, and getting feedback on that. We could certainly continue to do that in simply the name of transparency.
Thank you.
One more thing about the member-directed resources also that's kind of interesting is that the member-directed resources don't necessarily need to be just St. Charles. So, for example, if St. Charles and Naperville wanted to partner on a renewable resource, we could do that. We could partner with another community. We could partner with 5 other communities. So we can combine our resources and all of the efficiencies of doing it with more communities than just us.
And I guess that's where it comes in with more local input here with council and other community councils. Is maybe a resolution or I don't know how that would work. Would you communicate? You know what I'm saying? Like, where do you even start that conversation, I guess?
Can you just repeat your question, Brian? I'm sorry, was that about?
So if we want to partner up with member-directed resources with Naperville.
Yeah, I think that would be as simple as an IGA, and that's something we would work through as we get into. Yep.
Okay.
So, can you talk about the process? If you get to April 30th, you know, there's no consensus about continuing on with IMEA, and, you know, whoever's sitting in government services, you know, come May 1st, can you talk a little bit about what your recommendation would be to this body moving forward, about how we start to go? What's the timeline, where you would begin recommending, you know, because if you wake up on May 1st or May 15th or June 1st and there's not a consensus to move forward with, you know, a continued partnership with IMEA, or at least at that current time, can you talk a little bit about what your recommendation would be to this body about where we go from there?
So I think strictly from a public works staff perspective, you know, it feels like a long time, 10 years from now, but we've given you plenty of examples. These resources take a lot of time, and they take a lot of time with the agency we already have in place. If we say no to IMEA, and let's say we want to create a new joint action agency or a joint action agency with Naperville, think about how do you get that conversation started. So I think from a staff perspective, what I would suggest is that if we don't meet that deadline, we kind of pause and say, what now? We didn't meet that deadline. Okay, that's fine. So do you want us to spend the next year hiring some of these consultants, answering more of these questions you have, doing these performas, getting Nextera and agencies like that involved with options, and getting some guidance from you as to what we can do to help you either to get to that decision, whether it's yes or no. Because I think it's just as important to get to the no decision as it is to the yes decision from my perspective, because a no decision tells us where we're at. And we can move forward then on finding out how we're going to supply power in St. Charles after 2035.
Any other thoughts? Anything else, Pete? No? Good. All right, I think we're all set there. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Almost.
Well done here.
Almost.
Almost an hour.
Almost.
Yep.
So that brings us to item 6, public comment. I venture to guess there's a lot of people here who are planning to make a public comment. So just a couple of reminders before. One, please remind us your name when you come up. We don't need your address, where you live, anything like that. Just your name. A couple of asks from the chair. We're going on 9 o'clock. I want everybody to take as much time as they want. Don't feel rushed, but just please be mindful of there's probably going to be a stack of people behind you. So if we're covering some of the same topics, to try and maybe, get to a topic we haven't covered yet. The recommendation, I think, from this group following this meeting, again, Pete, thank you for taking the time, is pursuing some public forums here in the month of April, so we can have more discussion and pursue some of these questions as we're continuing to explore this. With that, I will open up for public comment, and don't be shy if you've been waiting. Should I close it? I'm just kidding. Sorry, Greg, I changed my mind. You're all set.
First. I'll be real brief, too. Brian mentioned about an IG, Greg Taylor. Sorry, Brian. Greg Taylor. Brian mentioned about an IGA, about trying to work on the renewable cap. I think really what would be beneficial for us all is get an IGA and pull our usage with these people that are still thinking about holding out to look at options, because with any purchasing contract, volume is king. And if we're going to do an IGA, let's do an IGA, and let's look at it from our options of sourcing different power. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, Paul Woods, Ward 2. I think I'm being well represented here, so thank you, everyone. So I had a bunch of questions written down, and I promise I'll be brief. When I was looking at the initial slides in the first presentation, I actually planned on not even covering the bulk of my questions, because the bulk of my questions were in the same vein as most of you were asking, which is, well, wait a minute, what are our options? What diligence has been done up to this point? Surely, in the last year or so, that that this discussion has been had, that information has been shared with the board, and I've just, as a resident, wasn't paying attention to it. But then all of your questions were basically like, hey, wait a minute, we don't actually have actionable detail here. Certainly we don't have third-party, non-vested interests giving us viable options for what is, let's be honest, asking you all in our names to make a 30-year commitment in 30 days. And without having all of the information for all of the options in front of you, analyzed, vetted, argued about, for as long as it takes, then you're not doing your job as a member of this council. Okay, that's not what we send you here to do. We send you here to make decisions on our behalf. And if it's a 30-year decision, hey, take as long as you need. This time frame from IMEA is artificial. It can wait. The contract doesn't require us to make a decision. The current one gives us 5 more years to make a decision. and that is 5 years out. Them coming up to us now and saying, oh, you know what? End of April, let's go. Okay, cool story, bro. Not interested. Like, their urgency is not our urgency for a 30-year commitment, and we need all of the options on the table. Also, the information that has been provided up to this point by IMEA seemingly has not been vetted. It has not been verified. It has not been compared. It's not been audited. So we're just being asked to take their analysis at its word and then make a decision without saying, I have questions. I need to understand what this really means. And also, what are the risks of proceeding? We're supposed to take their word for that as well. There are known risks and there are unknown risks. There could be regulatory compliance, other changes. Certainly when Prairie State Campus was built, the decision to get on board with that seemingly was based on cost estimates, which doubled, if not worse, if I understand the history correctly. So what are the next unforeseen challenges that are going to happen while we're operating, while we're decommissioning, that are going to affect us, right? And certainly some of the questions that were asked about, you know, hey, if we get on board with this, does that incentivize IMEA and by extension Prairie State to continue its operations? It certainly does. It absolutely does. And anybody that says otherwise, well, maybe they're just not correct. So I'll just leave you with this. Please pump the brakes, perform a comprehensive assessment using individuals that are not vested in the status quo. Show your work. That means not just amongst yourselves, but to us. And also a vote of no before April 30th on executing a contract that goes from 2035 to 2055 does not prevent us from doing so at a later date. So let's not pretend like if we say slow down, then that means everything falls apart. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Isabella Ruiz. Firstly, I just want to cover how Peter previously said that IMEA plans to go 100% sustainable within the 2050, but Prairie State alone, as of September 2024, is number 12 in the top climate polluter in this country. So is that really feasible? Their goals, which are supposed to be benchmarks, I feel like aren't actually, we don't see that in action. We're not going to be able to see that in action. And they're responsible, Prairie State is responsible for 4.66 billion pounds of fly ash. So that's going to affect us heavily. And I just believe that it isn't sustainable. How is that actually feasible for us to reach 100% sustainability by 2050 when they're producing that much amount each year? And that's just my rhetorical question there for you all.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Steve Leffler. I'm a local citizen. I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. Before I came here, I watched the Naperville, went into YouTube and typed in IMEA Naperville and watched 45 minutes of a pretty good presentation from IMEA about who they are and what they do. And that all kind of makes some sense, even though I'm one of those guys who would shut down all the coal plants tomorrow if I could. But I see that we also have to keep the lights on and keep the businesses running and charge up our phones. So we have to do something to transition off, and it looks like they've got a solid plan. But as a community, we may want to do more, and that's where I had questions about the contract. Are all of the contracts between all the communities identical?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. Is there an opportunity for us to have an addendum, since we're a pretty large portion of this? You know, we're 12%. If we got Naperville in on this, maybe the two of us, or add in Winnetka, we could be over 50% of the total. Maybe we have an opportunity for an addendum that says, hey, by 2035, if you're not at 50%, we have the opportunity to go in and add our own renewables at a level that we feel comfortable at.
Yeah, so we'll take that question and continue to pursue it and get an answer that we can all agree upon.
Okay. And are we going to, I believe it was your point, or Ron's point, are we coordinating with Naperville or other communities to set CO2 benchmarks that we're going to expect IMEA to hit before we sign some sort of contract with them?
Same. So any of those questions, we're going to make sure that they're written down, collected, so that we all have a reasonable answer. So continue to ask the questions. We'll make sure that they get answered appropriately so that nobody's speaking out of turn.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Jose Sagaste, and I would like to suggest to bring other companies to come over and make presentations. I don't think we have to take all the information in one meeting. Maybe they come over here and say, you guys are too late. You can't do anything about it but sign with IMEA. That's the end of it. They may say, hey, yeah, we would like to work with you, and there are opportunities, there are possibilities, and we can go with that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members of the Government Services Committee, I'm Ted Ballard, NEST co-chair. First of all, I love all the questions, I love all the comments I've heard tonight. And the ones I'm especially fond of is St. Charles getting together with Naperville to do a deal in one way or another. I think that that's real potential. If you added the total electricity consumed by Naperville, St. Charles, and Winnetka, that's about 50% of what the IMEA produces. We ought to have some significant leverage, whether we're negotiating with IMEA or with a power marketer. I became concerned about the possibility that our city council was planning to bring IMEA's contract extension. It's fair, Peter, sir. It's not a contract extension. It's a replacement contract. It'll last for 30 years once we sign it. I was concerned that we were going to take this to the floor for a vote. So after the March 18th City Council meeting, a colleague of mine at NEST and I talked to the mayor, talked to a couple council members, and they all said the same thing. There will be no vote brought to the floor in April, period. Some of the reasons that were given by these folks were the contract period is far too long. The electrical industry is undergoing unprecedented change, moving faster than it has at any time since Thomas Edison was the king. So the right approach, in my opinion, is to keep your contracts short and see what happens. Mayor Worley said, if this contract were offered to my business, I would never sign it. These three individuals believe that local generation and battery storage are the future, and the future is now. Naperville wants to reduce our energy costs, this may be of interest to you as well, by shading peaks without worrying about what IMEA's overall peaks are. Even with an MDR, we are prohibited from using batteries behind the meter, from the utility, using batteries behind the meter to shave our peaks. I think that's just wrong. In addition, the contract that was proposed to us is missing a price commitment of any kind. There's no price commitments in the contract. The contract has no performance metrics, none. And the contract offers Naperville no out even if the IMEA fails to deliver. No guardrails, no exit clauses. An out would have been really handy after the Prairie State construction ran $1 billion over budget. We are still paying for that. This is something, do you remember the slide with the bars, two colored bars, big blue ones and little red ones? We took that slide, we looked at what the prices that we were being charged for everything, electricity, capacity, and networking. And we compared that to what we would have paid if we just bought that from the PJM markets. You know, kind of a risky strategy, but our analysis says that over the past 10 years, Naperville paid a $320 million surplus over what we could have paid just using these markets. I wonder what a backward-looking cost analysis would reveal for St. Charles. If you're interested, let me know. Though next we're still preparing our presentation to the PUAB, the Public Utility Advisory Board, on April 8th, I can share with you some of our views and recommendations that our presentation will include. First of all, Naperville has the opportunity and the obligation to address climate change. Number two, what is the cleaner, cheaper energy future could look like. Number three, what the process of charting a path forwards to an energy future should look like. We believe that we've embarked on the wrong path, and we'll have some recommendations on how to get this straight. A couple comments about both the CES report, which I had an opportunity to ask questions of CES. They chose not to answer those questions, unfortunately. Multiple opportunities have not been addressed by IMEA's presentation, nor by CES's report. Here's just one glaring omission. If you've seen the draft report, you may remember them talking about Naperville going on their own and signing a PPA with a power marketer. And that was, they left it at that. They didn't even mention that these power marketers could offer full requirements contracts with services, which is exactly the same thing that we have with IMEA. In addition to that, they could offer partial requirement contracts, managed flexible or adaptable managed load contracts, which could be really attractive if you want to take the position that I want to be in control of how quickly, right, our village, our city, how quickly we want to reduce our carbon emissions. The other thing that is important to understand is, in general, power marketers used to offer 20-year contracts back when energy was pretty flat, nothing going on, load not increasing, technology not making big contributions until 27 when fracking occurred. They're recommending these days you should take a shorter contract. We can offer a 3-year contract. We can offer a 5-year contract, and we can get you up and switched over typically in less than 3 years. One fellow that worked for one of these mentioned contracts, so they just converted a utility in Texas, a municipal, from one power supply to theirs in under 6 months. So do look at the final version of the CES report, but be aware they've missed some really important stuff that would be valuable to your community. Rather than stand up here and talk at length about what the IMEA missed, they'll just finish with 3 things. You know, their calling card is affordable, sustainable, reliable electricity, right? I think we've heard that before. Our contract, like your contract with the IMEA, is purely a financial contract. IMEA has nothing, zero, zip, nada, to do with your own reliable electricity. 95% of outages are the result of trees falling on power lines. It's the municipality, the terrific municipality that Mr. Sir runs, to keep the wires attached. Only 5% nationwide of power outages are the result of an outage across the regional transmission operator, PGM in our case. Second thing is, it's a good thing that IMEA says affordable, because they certainly are not the cheapest, and I can show you why. And the last thing is, the state of Illinois, if you looked at the entire generation of electricity, and we are an exporter of electricity, is only 15% from burning coal. With our contract with the IMEA, 80% of our electricity comes from burning coal. It's the dirtiest electricity in the state. So the only thing that they're sustaining for the next 13 years is the burning of coal. And then we can have some fun. But only if the government tells them to stop. They don't have anything in the contract that says they'll cut. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I feel myself having drifted to the front. Thank you very much for this long, intensive discussion we're having tonight. This is really an outstanding example of what democracy looks like. We are the owners of our own public utility, and we're learning to see what it means to be the owners of a public utility. You've not had to make or consider this idea for decades. The last time you chose to think about where the power supply comes from, you made a choice for decades into the future, and you chose Prairie State Coal Plant via IMEA, along with the Trimble County Coal Plant. So I do appreciate the fact that you are taking this very seriously and considering the long-term implications of the short-term decision that happens over the next month. But I do want to say, again, that I'm not an energy expert, but I'm concerned with public education and how our communities and our civic groups in Batavia, Geneva, and St. Charles understands how we come to understand what it means to be a public utility and what our responsibility is. So to that issue, I want to thank, my eyesight's not good enough, the councilperson that brought up the fact there still is quite a bit of confusion here. And from the perspective of the public, who's going to be assessing your let's say, your performance on this, it seems to be there's still a lot of confusion, specific points, and there's only going to be this one little group, so it won't take long. We're confusing the power supply with the ancillary services, with the utility. And until we have a chart when you're talking about those things and keep those separate, you're going to be persistently in confusion. ComEd keeps being brought up again and again as a power supplier. In the 1990s, we deregulated the utilities, and ComEd does not supply power. They are pass-through, just like you are. Peter said it perfectly when he said that ComEd is like you are. They run the power lines, they run a utility. That's what they do. They're not the power supply. So to give them a benefit of the doubt, they may be referring to what is called the default power supply that ComEd provides to its customers if they don't choose something else. So even if you get that far into the detail, you have to realize there's actually two different issues happening here. The CUB website, Citizens Utility Board, makes it very clear that about 80-20% split of ComEd customers, 80% of them do not use Aries. They go with the default energy supplier, which is IPA, set up for that purpose. But for industrial suppliers, that ratio is reversed. 80% of industrial suppliers do not use the default supplier. They use what's called alternative, what are we going to call them? ARES, R-E-S-E, alternative retail electrical suppliers. Each of these individual industrial companies all manage to go out and find their own electrical power supply. And if they're signing up for that, you have to imagine they're doing even better than the default power supply from IPA. IPA is probably the largest purchaser of energy supply in Illinois. You'd think they could do a knockout job at that, but they have their hands tied by the limitations of the length of the contracts they can do. That would be part of the legislation and the sausage-making process. It's a little bit beyond me at the moment. But yeah, IPA does a really pretty good job in general for regular folks, and it's like CUB suggests that that's the way you go. But industrial suppliers who have financial officers and accounting staff that can look at the contracts and pay attention to stuff, that we can do even better than that. So this is something that happens when you get into the simple thing keeping separate where's the power coming from, as opposed to how are we getting ancillary services, as opposed to what are we doing with our utility. And that rarely comes up. They usually get rolled in throughout the course of a presentation, talking a little bit about this, a little bit about that. So that's just one piece. So I'll cut that part short there. We've already had a conversation briefly about the reliability issues and how much that is really up to our local utilities. They do an excellent job of providing reliability. When the power lines go down, they get them repaired. The reliability is also a key component to what's called the regional transportation organizations, which you know of as the grid. The people who operate the grid, this is their first, second, and third concern, is that it runs reliable. Nobody participates on the grid without supplying reliability. If they fail to do so, they get fined to the tune of tens and hundreds of millions of dollars. It's a very serious business. So of course, IMEA supplies us reliable electricity because they participate on the grid. But that reliability does not come from IMEA. It comes from your local utility, and it comes from the rules and regulations that operate for the grid, the regional transportation. Up here, it's Commonwealth Edison, and then the rest of the state, it's MISO. So they are actually using coal plants. They're in a completely different grid than the one we operate in, and still our power is quite reliable. So I want to just mention that reliability issue keeps coming up again and again, as if that's a reason to choose IMEA or IMEA's current contract offer over other things. And I don't think it's really a substantial consideration. Finally, there was a mention of what if it's not there? What if we don't have enough renewable energy in 2050, 2045, whatever's going on like that? And I have to tell you, that is a very real possibility. What's going on right now is the horse race between fossil fuel industry and their production of energy, the nuclear power, and renewable energies. And which one will win out in the long term depends on who gets the most attention paid to it. Fossil fuel industry has a several decade lead in this, and they now have control of much of our government and much of the subsidies, much of the funding in order for them to persist for a much longer time, if at all possible. Nuclear power has many advocates and much money and funding, but it still remains the most expensive option. So it's held up there a little bit as they try to find ways to do it more economically, like maybe mini nukes or cute nukes or something that can get going like that sooner rather than later. In the meantime, renewable energy is getting built all over the place really rather rapidly, really rather easily. So it's a little premature to assume that we will never have enough renewable energy, especially if we join in with the fossil fuel interest and say we want that to last as long as possible, rather than making a public statement saying that we will do what we can do to pursue renewable energy. And then lastly, there was a comment about the carbon capture sequestration. And IMEA, of course, is not pursuing carbon capture sequestration. That's Prairie State. They have still an outstanding SOI, solicitation of interest, for independent developers to build a carbon capture sequestration plant. There's been no responses yet. There's a bit of a kerfuffle at the federal level about rules and regulations. So currently that's a bit speculative as to what will or won't happen. If and when they do build carbon capture sequestration, that's a choice they will make. The other 8 or 9 members of Prairie State, of which IMEA has only 1, and then you will live with that, even if you vote no. Because my last comment on is that tonight the issue of this IGA business came up. And I don't think we've had this discussion here at all before. And I was thinking it's a little bit like if you join up with Winnetka and Naperville and become IMEA North, you're actually larger than IMEA South. And you may want to ask if you want to let them in with you or not. This is all I have to say tonight. Thank you very much.
Just a reminder your name.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm Charlotte Schumeyer, and I just have a few concerns. They're not really I don't have an answer for it because I'm not a professional, but I do have I am a bit concerned. We don't have a time for a study, but I'm also concerned about our reliance on Naperville because they are a significantly larger city. They have 150,000 people. We have something like 40. And so obviously we're going to use a lot less power as well as a lot different. So I'm a bit worried about a reliance on that in such a short time span. I'd also like to talk about the carbon capture because although IMEA doesn't have any control over that, Prairie State does. And Public Eye Contact is a news site that works with, that did a study with Andrew Wren from, I think he's from Prairie Rivers Network, and who first of all reiterated the fact that there are 76 annual deaths that are connected to Prairie State, which IMEA is investing around 12%, and I think that's the largest percentage invested by one body. But the carbon catching that they're looking at is upfront for half of it, $2 billion, something that would obviously trickle up the line to us, and then yearly, $175 million. And so that's just, we have to think about if they do continue to pursue that, that's something that is going to raise the price of an already more expensive option. It's also risky to change, it's more risky for IMEA to change to a more sustainable option because they are 80% carbon. All of the timelines that they're giving, through either federal or even state, are more for the energy utility companies that are using around 20%, because on average it is, the most that I've found from other companies is around 38%. It's going to be significantly easier and cheaper for them to switch to something more sustainable, more carbon neutral than it is for us. And so there's going to be extra costs, extra bumps, where are we going to get, how are we going to get our power from something, especially because it comes from two main plants. We'd have to replace it in a way that it just would be very hard to grapple, I guess. I also worry about the jobs for city energy if we do switch to an independent. Constellation, I did do some research, and I do know that they would not allow for us to continue to use the city, but if we did switch to an independent power source that would, supply us with energy that is cheaper, that is more sustainable or carbon friendly, where would those people go? We'd have to think about so it's, we'd have to find, if we do look at other independent options, I would like to see some options that are maybe smaller, but also would allow for us to continue to service those jobs and capabilities that we have currently. And that's all.
Thank you.
Oh, great, thank you.
Hi, Bruce Jones. I live in Naperville, and I am part of the NEST group that Ted mentioned a few minutes ago. One of the things that we've done as part of the Energy Committee is we have interviewed several energy providers because we're so frustrated that Naperville, even in their consulting study, they focused in on joint action agencies, companies that can provide energy that they own as well. So they're missing kind of the big picture. As you said, they haven't thought about going out to bid to Constellation, NextEra, EDF, and those kinds of companies. But we've had conversations with them for the last 6 months to a year, and they are really interested in our business, of course, and anybody else who might be interested. There's also, when you do want to go out for bid, there's the North American Energy Markets Association, NAMA. They're the ones that all the utilities, the cities, they go out for bid. They post those bids out there on their websites, and they get lots of people to, provide proposals for them. So they do get the lower cost by having competition. And boy, if I could make a recommendation, I would highly recommend a competitive bid like what we want Naperville to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? I see people getting up. I can't tell if they're leaving.
I think go ahead and vote.
There you go. Just your name.
Hi, I'm Maureen Spillman. Just to follow up on that briefly, when we've talked to both NextEra and Constellation, they have also said that they can provide services that IMEA provides right now, and that we can keep our local utility just the way it is. So they can provide what we're getting right now, and they are very excited and happy to work with both St. Charles and with Naperville. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a long night. Peter, thank you so much for your presentation. It was concise, clear, it clarified some things, and we appreciate your effort. And City Council, thank you for asking all the hard questions. My name is Debbie Motter. I just strongly encourage this council to look at this contract, read it, and look at what it doesn't have in the contract. I don't think maybe IMEA is our best choice. This contract, I feel strongly, is missing guardrails, benchmarks, assurances for St. Charles. And that's probably my biggest concern about that contract. So look at those things. I hope that we, Ryan, do have a public forum. That was fantastic news to hear. And we too are watching for all the upcoming information out of Naperville. But just know that's one source for Naperville. They're also holding public forums after that. So I hope that we can do the same thing too. Let's get it done.
Thank you. Anyone else? Looks like that might be a wrap. Any additional items from committee, staff? Heather? No?
Nothing from here.
Well, again, I appreciate everyone, obviously, my colleagues up here, so it's a heavy topic, and I appreciate everybody coming ready to discuss. And Peter, again, thank you to you and your staff.
Thank you.
Everybody who joined us tonight, thank you. With that, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? This meeting is adjourned.
Nice job.